wasn't focused on reveling in his success. Elon Musk believed that Tesla was spending too much money on NVIDIA chips. Apple, Meta, Google, Tesla, and Amazon, who design chips as a... In the future, I expect this trend to only expand, as more and more companies see the value of bringing chip design in-house. Steve Jobs was obsessed with controlling every detail of Apple's products. His core belief was that Apple's hardware and software should be tightly coupled together in tandem, and should not be used in tandem with any other company's hardware or software. This is because he believed that software and hardware, designed specially for each other, made for streamlined and seamless integration that enhanced user experience. Combining Apple's software with another company's hardware, or vice versa, the way Microsoft software is used with hundreds of non-Microsoft designed PCs, would destroy Apple's ability to make seamless products, according to Jobs. But in 2007, after the launch of the first iPhone, which completely revolutionized the mobile phone industry and the world, Jobs had a huge problem. He wasn't focused on reveling in his success, but was obsessed with trying to figure out how to make the iPhone better. The things he knew needed to be significantly improved were its size, speed, and battery life, all of which are dependent on its chip. But the problem was the iPhone ran on an ARM-based Samsung chip, which Jobs described as a shit product. So, in true Steve Jobs fashion, he decided that Apple could do a better job making their own computer chips themselves. So in 2008, Apple acquired PA-Semi, a small Silicon Valley chip startup known for designing power-efficient processors, for about $278 million, which eventually morphed into Apple's in-house chip design department. And then, in 2010, Apple launched the A4 chip, its first iPhone chipset, which was completely designed in-house for the iPhone 4, which launched later that same year. And since then, every iPhone from the iPhone 4 onwards has used an Apple-designed chip. And since then, every tech company has dreamed of achieving the seamless integration that Apple was able to achieve when they made the decision to bring their chip design in-house. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our channel. In this video, we're going to continue our discussion on the semiconductor industry by diving deeper to take a look at fabless non-chip design companies, which are more commonly known in the industry as system companies. These are companies like Apple, Meta, Google, Tesla, and Amazon, who design chips as a complement to their main business of software or electronic devices. These companies are some of the largest companies in the world, and they play a crucial role in the semiconductor industry as some of the industry's largest designers. So if you want to learn why some of the world's top tech companies began designing their own computer chips, be sure to watch today's video. And if you want to learn more about the semiconductor industry, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Let's go. So at this point, many of you may be wondering, why did companies like Tesla, Amazon, and Apple think that it was better for them to design their own chips instead of just hiring a fabless chip design company like Qualcomm or an IDM like Intel to design their chips for them, as had been the norm in the tech industry for decades? Well, to understand this, we need to take another look back to the beginning of the smartphone era with Apple. In 2007, Apple launched the iPhone, completely revolutionizing the mobile phone industry and the world. At that time, most of the digital devices like music players, PCs, and mobile phones had their chips manufactured using one of two models that we described in the last video. The first is an OEM or a device manufacturer would contract with a fabless design company like Qualcomm or Broadcom to design their chip. Then the chip would be manufactured at a foundry chosen by the fabless design company. Or the other option was that the OEM would go to an IDM, which does both the chip design and manufacturing, like Intel, and have them design and manufacture their chips for them. But because the iPhone was the first smartphone, and Apple demanded continuous innovation and improvement to drive their market lead, Samsung, the chip design company that Apple hired to make the original chips for the iPhone, struggled to keep pace with Apple's demands. And as mentioned earlier, Steve Jobs was obsessed with the idea that the iPhone should be a seamlessly integrated device throughout all parts of its hardware and software. So, in order to resolve both of these issues, the computer chip, or the brains of the iPhone, would need to be designed by people who deeply understood the body of the iPhone that this chip would be implanted in, and the software that would run on it. So, just a year after the launch of the iPhone, Apple decided that it would begin designing its own A-series iPhone chips and M-series PC chips. Then, in 2010, it launched the iPhone 4, which became the first iPhone to use an A-series chip designed completely by Apple. In doing this, Apple created a new semiconductor industry model, known as the system company model, where the OEM would bring the design portion of the chip production, previously done by a fabless design company or IDM, in-house. After Apple made the decision to take chip design in-house, surprisingly, very few companies initially followed, as few companies could afford to create an in-house chip design department that could outcompete dedicated fabless design companies, or they didn't see it as the best strategy, as venturing into chip design would take them too far away from their core business. In the early 2010s, for example, the only other major tech companies to start in-house chip design were Amazon, who had a very small team who designed chips for the Kindle, and Google, who designed chips for their smart TVs. It wasn't until around 2015 that this trend changed, and the world's largest tech companies began designing their own chips in-house. This was because around that time, cloud computing and the data centers that powered it began to make up huge portions of the largest tech companies' businesses. For example, around 40% of Microsoft's revenue, 15% of Amazon's revenue, and 12% of Google's revenue comes from cloud computing. The main problem these companies faced was that cloud computing and the data centers that ran them required astronomical amounts of computer chips. And the main data center chip design companies of the time, Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA, all charged very high prices for these chips, knowing that they are the essential engines that run all data centers. Essentially, what this meant was that chip design finally got close enough to the core of these companies' businesses for it to become financially viable for them to bring chip design in-house. And once they set up the infrastructure to design data center chips in-house, designing chips for other applications like mobile phones and IoT devices became a much easier transition. So many of these tech companies were perfectly positioned to start designing their own AI chips when the AI boom started in the early 2020s. At the same time, Tesla, the world's leading electronic vehicle manufacturer, began developing autopilot and full self-driving features in their cars. This required them to buy millions of NVIDIA GPUs to handle the workloads it took to train the models that ran these platforms. Then in 2019, Tesla decided that GPUs, which were originally designed for graphics processing, then for machine learning, were not optimized for the vision-only AI that was used to train self-driving models that Tesla vehicles operated on. On top of that, Elon Musk believed that Tesla was spending too much money on NVIDIA chips. He believed that they could make more suitable chips for their products and at lower costs by bringing the design in-house. So in 2019, Tesla launched its own full self-driving on-vehicle chip. And in 2021, it launched the Dojo D1 data center chip to train its own AI models optimized for self-driving. So now in 2025, because of the extremely high cost of computing power, driven by the need to run AI models and store data in the cloud, many of the world's largest tech companies have decided to adopt the system company model and have moved their chip design capabilities in-house. So now that we've reviewed the history of how system companies started to design their own chips in-house, let's get into what these companies actually do. Like we mentioned previously, when it comes to computer chips, these companies do the exact same thing that the fabless chip design companies do. But the main difference is, for the system companies, chip design is not the core part of their business. It is simply an extension of their core business, as the chips they design go into their own devices. So you could say that the system companies are really a combination of a fabless design company and an OEM, because they design chips and use chips in their own finished devices. So one question you might be wondering is, how are these system companies similar to fabless chip design companies? First, both of these companies design chips using EDA software and chip design IP. Both companies also manage the chip production process by managing all steps from the design of the chips to selecting fabs and suppliers to choosing an OSAT and receiving a final finished chipset. And another related question you might be wondering is, how do system companies differ from fabless chip design companies? First, system companies are their own customer. They design chips that ultimately get used in their own products. They don't sell chips to other OEMs like a fabless chip design company. This means their chips aren't used in multiple companies' devices the way NVIDIA's GPUs are used in dozens of companies' data centers, or Qualcomm's modem chips are used in several smartphone companies' phones. This difference has huge implications for how these companies operate, as fabless chip design companies have to work with customers directly to sell their chips and to agree on chip designs. And because of that, a fabless chip design company also tries to make their chips as generally usable as possible, so that the same chip design can be sold to multiple customers. Whereas a system company's chip design department doesn't have to interact with customers in the same way. And they design a chip that's only used in their device and is so optimized for it. So now that we've talked about the similarities and differences between the system and fabless chip design models, let's talk about why an OEM would make the decision to bring chip design in-house. The biggest advantage to bringing chip design in-house is what drove Steve Jobs to bring Apple's chip design in-house in the first place. synergy across the entire system. If a tech company has an in-house chip design department, it and the other departments can work closely together to ensure seamless integration of their chips with other parts of their device, including the device's hardware and software, in a way that is hard to do with a contracted fabless design company. This means that the system company's chip is 100% optimized for exactly how they use it. The second advantage of bringing chip design in-house is cost savings. Fabless chip design companies generally sell their advanced chipsets at very high per unit cost. That means if an OEM buys millions of units of a chipset from a fabless design company, they could end up spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars buying the chips from them. So, even though it can be very expensive to invest in building an in-house chip design capability, if you're a large company who sells millions of units, you'll likely save money overall by bringing your chip design in-house. But if you're not a huge company, it's likely not worth it to invest in all the infrastructure needed to bring chip design in-house. The third advantage of bringing chip design in-house is process control, especially when considering trade secrets, private company information, and IP. Companies like Apple and Google work very hard to conceal their latest projects. Otherwise, their competitors will likely take their ideas and try to beat them to market. Bringing chip design, along with all other parts of the production process in-house, allows a system company to maintain control over the entire process and protect private information. Now let's talk about what the disadvantages of a tech company bringing chip design in-house are. The first disadvantage of bringing chip design in-house is it's really expensive. Developing a custom SoC costs hundreds of millions to billions of dollars at the leading edge nodes. That includes EDA tool, IP, verification, prototype, and tape-out costs. Most companies can't make this model profitable unless they ship tens of millions of units like Apple does with the iPhone. Just like foundries, chip design companies have to amortize their costs across all units sold, meaning that the more they sell, the lower their per unit costs will be. So, to stay competitive, fabless chip design companies pull demand from many customers to lower their per unit costs, something a system company can't do. The second disadvantage of bringing chip design in-house is that a system company will never be able to have the broad expertise of a fabless chip design company. Building chips requires deep hardware engineering expertise in areas as broad as RTL design, verification, physical design, timing closure, DFT, power analysis, and packaging. Big tech companies traditionally focus on software and systems, so hiring and retaining semiconductor talent is a challenge. And they can't accumulate the expertise that comes from working across dozens of devices and projects for different customers and applications that a fabless chip design company can get. The third disadvantage of bringing chip design in-house is strategic distraction. Because a system company's core business is not chip design, it can be hard for them to invest in and grow their chip design portion of their business without it taking away from their core competency. So now that we've reviewed the history of system design companies, how they differ from fabless design companies, and the advantages and disadvantages of bringing chip design in-house, let's go over who the top companies that follow the system company model are. The first company to follow this model is also the world's largest consumer of computer chips, Apple. As we mentioned previously, since 2010, Apple has designed all of their iPhone, Mac, iPad, and Apple Watch chips in-house. They have the largest chip design department of any system company, employing over 5,000 people to work on chip design and running the entire supply chain to produce their SoCs. Google is the world's second largest system company, employing over 2,000 people to work on their chip design. Google's chip design department mainly designs Tensor SoCs, which are used in Google's Pixel phones, and TPUs, which are a chip used for running AI models in data centers. Amazon is another huge system company, employing over 2,000 people to work in their chip design department. Amazon's chip design business, while initially created to design chips for the Kindle devices, has shifted most of its focus to supporting AWS, Amazon's cloud computing business. Amazon's chip design department designs their Graviton CPU, which is an ARM-based CPU for AWS servers, and Inferentia and Trainium, which are AI accelerators for cloud computing. Tesla and Elon Musk's two other major companies, X and SpaceX, are another set of companies that have invested billions of dollars to bring chip design in-house. Tesla employs around 1,000 employees who work on chip design and has recently expanded its chip design business by partnering with Samsung Foundry in Austin to manufacture Tesla-designed chips. Tesla's main chips are its full self-driving chip, which goes on its vehicles to power their self-driving capabilities, and its Dojo chips, which are used to run AI models optimized for training self-driving cars in data centers. And the final major system company that we'll discuss is Meta. Meta also has a sizable chip design business, employing over 1,000 people, mainly to support its investments in AR and VR devices and AI. As can be seen from this video, because of the soaring costs of computing, driven first by cloud computing and then AI, has driven many tech companies to bring their chip design operations in-house. And they are investing billions of dollars to do this in order to optimize their products and to save money overall. In the future, I expect this trend to only expand as more and more companies see the value of bringing chip design in-house. So that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed today's video or you have any questions about the system companies or the role they play in the semiconductor industry, be sure to leave a comment below. And if you want to learn more about the semiconductor industry, be sure to subscribe to our channel.